My name is Richard Hayes. I'm 52 years old, and for over 2 decades, I served as a technical lieutenant colonel at a major military base out in Texas. Not many people knew my name, and that was fine by me. I didn't need a spotlight to do what I did. What I built didn't need applause. It just needed to work. And it did. Quietly, precisely, every single day. From flight schedules to radar tracking to logistics inventory, every mission-critical system in that base passed through a framework I designed by hand. No shortcuts, no templates. Just me, a keyboard, and a room that smelled like burnt coffee and buzzing servers. I wasn't the guy they brought into meetings to talk strategy or shake hands. I was the guy they called when something stopped working at 2 a.m., and nobody else could explain why. I carried that weight without ever making it loud. Most folks thought the systems ran themselves. But the truth is, those systems ran on people like me. On long nights, failed updates, and patches written during blackouts. I didn't have a rank that opened every door, but I had root access that could bring everything to a halt. Not that I ever wanted to. My job was to keep things running, not tear them down. For over 20 years, I was the spine of that infrastructure. And I say that not with pride, but with clarity. Because the spine doesn't ask for praise. It just carries the weight until one day, it doesn't. I showed up early, left late, and in between. I made sure every trigger fired, every system synced, and every fallback kicked in before someone even noticed a delay. I didn't do it for a medal or a headline. I did it because that's what the job needed. There's a certain kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you held something that big together for that long. Even if nobody ever said thank you, even if they forgot your name after the meeting ended, you hold the line and you do it right. That was my role. That's who I was. And this is the story of the day I stopped. The systems didn't hum, they breathed. Every sensor ping, every radar pulse, every logistical update passed through layers I designed from the ground up. There was no instruction manual when I started, just chaos. But over the years, I carved order from that mess. I didn't just maintain the backbone of base operations, I built it. Flight paths, cargo routes, drone schedules, satellite uplinks. If it moved or reported, I had a hand in it. The command center liked to say it all worked thanks to modernization. But what they really meant was, someone made sure it didn't fall apart. That someone was me. I wasn't flashy. Didn't lead briefings or drop acronyms into every sentence. But I knew the heartbeat of every server rack and the rhythm of every cycle. I didn't need a title to do my job. I needed trust. And for years that was enough. Then Colton arrived. Fresh-pressed uniform, spotless boots, and the kind of smile that said he thought every room was his before he walked in. Young, loud, and fluent in buzzwords. Efficiency, synergy, future-focused. Said with the confidence of someone who'd never had to rebuild a crashed system at 3 a.m. under blackout conditions. He wasn't there to learn, he was there to lead. Or at least pretend to. From the moment he took over, the shift was clear. Suddenly, there were slide decks about transformation. Consultants in suits walked the halls like they owned the place. And meetings got longer while the systems got slower. My name stopped appearing on planning emails. My chair at the table stayed empty even when I was in the room. They started calling me Robert. I corrected them once. Then, I stopped. Colton liked to talk about reducing legacy load. What he meant was me. He saw age as obsolescence. Never mind that the system still ran because of my old scripts and fail-safes. He wanted everything new, shiny, clickable. He didn't know half of what powered his dashboards lived in silent folders I built in 2008. I watched him give presentations about automation while the backend still relied on my hand-coded job triggers. He called a staff meeting once, something about performance elevation. Stood up there with his sleeves rolled, quoting articles like gospel. When he mentioned removing outdated admin layers, I knew exactly who he meant. My credentials, my logic trees, my fallback chains. The same ones that stopped a drone misfire 2 winters ago, but there was no footnote for that. just a nod to progress and a slide full of jargon. He smiled when he said it, like he was doing me a favor by phasing me out. I didn't flinch, I just watched. Because while he was busy networking up, I was still wired in. Still monitoring every silent error flag, still patching breaks before anyone saw them. That system didn't breathe without me. He didn't know that, and he didn't ask. The part that stung wasn't being ignored. It was knowing that if things went sideways, the people who pushed me out would have no idea how to fix what I left behind. They thought they were upgrading, but all they were doing was painting over steel with plastic. It might shine, sure, but it wouldn't hold when the pressure came. I didn't say anything. Not out loud, I just started making copies, diagrams, logs, backup paths, nothing fancy. Just enough to remind myself where everything lived. Because Colton wasn't the first to underestimate quiet people, and he wouldn't be the last to regret it. The truth is, I was never trying to be a hero. I just didn't like seeing something I built get gutted by someone who couldn't even spell checksum, so I stayed in the shadows. Watched them wave flags and hand out lanyards. Meanwhile, I kept the system alive. They thought I was a ghost, some relic clinging to old code. They were wrong. I wasn't clinging, I was holding the line. And one day, I knew they'd find out what happens when that line lets go. The email came in at 8:04 p.m. Subject line plain. Just one sentence inside. Watch your tone or you'll watch your access disappear. No name, no punctuation. Just cold intent, like a warning scribbled on the back of a napkin. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I closed the window without replying. I didn't get angry. I'd seen worse threats in war zones, in supply drops gone wrong, in systems hanging by a thread. This was just a young man flexing muscles he hadn't earned. He thought control was a login screen and a badge. He didn't understand that real control was knowing what each piece does when the lights go out. I leaned back in my chair, listened to the low hum of the server rack in the next room, and made a quiet decision. It was time to check the bones. I started with the job logs. Every overnight task, every scheduled operation, every emergency flag built into the core. They still ran on the scripts I wrote back in 2009. Nobody had touched them since. The timestamps told the whole story, not one new edit, not one replacement. I moved to the fallback scheduler, the thing that kept operations from spiraling when primary jobs failed. Still mine, still clean. Next came the access paths, admin rights, system inheritance, credential dependencies. Every major process still funneled through my ID, not just linked to it. Dependent on it. I pulled up the dependency maps, traced each node. It was like watching a nervous system light up, every limb reporting back to the same brain. The name on that node hadn't changed in over a decade. I didn't feel triumphant. Just tired. Tired that they still didn't see it. Tired that they thought respect was something they could demand while standing on someone else's foundation. But I didn't say anything. I just got to work. I backed up everything. Clean copy of all logs, all triggers, all fallback paths. Saved it to a separate drive that never touched the network. Cold storage, out of reach. Then I printed a full system diagram. Physical copy, color-coded, every server, every job, every point of failure that would go red if my credentials vanished. It took a few hours. No rush, no panic, just quiet, steady hands. When I was done, I slid the pages into a folder and wrote the date across the front. It sat on the corner of my desk like a sealed envelope, not a threat, not a plan, just truth. I ran one final check before logging off. The access control list still showed my name, top-level admin, no backup, no secondary owner. The safety nets, the audit logs, the rollback commands, all of it still ran through me. That's when it hit me. They had redesigned the dashboards, changed the interfaces, and slapped new branding on top. But they had never replaced the engine. They just stopped looking under the hood. I shut the lid of my laptop and sat in the dark for a while. The silence didn't bother me. It felt familiar, like the stillness before a mission, like the quiet right before the first movement. Whatever they thought they were building, they built it on top of me. And someday, when the cracks started to show, they'd realize I was never the problem. I was the glue. I didn't need to fight back. I just needed to step aside and let the system prove it. I didn't cut wires. I didn't delete scripts or reroute systems into chaos. That would have been petty, noisy, a mess for someone else to clean. I wasn't there to cause damage. I was there to let truth show its face. So I logged in like I always had, quiet and early, before the base woke up, before anyone noticed anything was off. The fallback scheduler sat there like it always did, humming quietly in the background, catching drops no one saw, patching over mistakes no one knew they'd made. I opened the admin console, typed slow, deliberate. One by one, I removed my credentials from the automated recovery paths. Not to break them, just to step back. If someone had put a proper successor in place, the system would have handed things off. But there was no one waiting to catch it, just empty space. The code didn't protest. The systems didn't scream. They just went quiet. Like a plane gliding without a pilot, all instruments still lit, still ticking, but no hand on the controls. I revoked override authority, disabled auto-escalation chains, disabled fallback triggers. The scheduler still existed, it just had no driver now. No one to tell it when to intervene, when to reroute, when to protect the weak spots. I closed the laptop and didn't look back. I didn't feel anger, not even satisfaction. Just quiet, like something heavy had finally been set down. That night, I didn't check my phone. I didn't refresh the logs. I sat on the porch, same chair, same mug, and waited. Not for revenge, not for chaos, just for the truth to show up the way it always does when the noise fades. By morning, it had begun. The first missed flight log was a routine supply run to Nevada. Nothing critical, just fuel checks, weather sync, clearance data. The task failed without reroute. Then came the logistics dashboard. Pulled incomplete data from a misfired sync, flagged red on half the reports. No one got the alert. The fallback queue never activated. Half a dozen base operations flagged out of sync by 7:12 a.m. One by one, the lights on their boards turned yellow, then red, then quiet. People scrambled. Tried manual restarts. Tried reinitializing flows they didn't understand. But the logic was too layered. The recovery too specific. They were pulling on ropes without knowing what they were tied to. Someone tried to ping my old ID. Got a response error. Admin access revoked. Then the questions started flying. Why wasn't the radar sync running? Who owns the fallback scheduler? Why didn't the alerts get routed? Why are we blind? I wasn't watching any of it unfold in real time. I didn't have to. I'd seen it before, in simulations, in war games, in live ops. A system left hollow eventually shows its cracks. Not with explosions, but with silence. The kind that creeps in and lingers. It wasn't sabotage. I didn't break anything. I just stopped carrying weight for people who thought gravity didn't apply to them. I'd told them for years what held it all together. They called it old code. I called it design. They ignored it. So now they could feel what happened when it stepped aside. There's a moment when people realize the backup they always trusted is gone. It doesn't come with sirens. It comes with a blank screen. A report that never finishes. A call no system picks up. That's when they understand. Not everything broken makes noise. Sometimes it just disappears. At 6:17 a.m., the first anomaly hit. A scheduled recon flight didn't receive clearance data from the radar sync module. The system flagged it as pending, but no failover triggered. By 6:21, 3 more tasks were queued behind it, all waiting for the same logic chain that used to run silently in the background. The base servers blinked, held, and then froze. In ops control, voices rose fast. Screens began to flash yellow, then red. The radar stream displayed scrambled packets, no timestamps, no filters. Someone shouted across the room asking why the diagnostic flags hadn't rerouted. Another officer tried to pull the daily logistics overview, but the report came back with null values. The fallback parser wasn't there to correct the gaps. By 6:43, Junior techs were flipping through old protocol binders. Override attempts failed one after another. The console threw the same message every time: insufficient privileges. A lieutenant slammed a coffee cup into a desk and snapped at a second-year cadet to reroute through SysRH1. The reply came from a corner of the room, voice shaking. "Who owns SysRH1? The system says null. That is bad, right?" Nobody answered. They were too busy trying to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, I sat at my kitchen table with the blinds half open. Same ceramic mug in my hand, same steady breath. The logs were open on my laptop, but I didn't scroll. I didn't need to. I'd seen this story before. It always started slow, a missed trigger, a paused sync. Then the system began asking questions no one knew how to answer. Back at the base, the internal chat lit up with desperate pings. "Anyone know who built the RH scheduler? Why is everything pointing back to SysRH1? Why isn't fallback kicking in?" A junior analyst posted a screen capture in the command thread. The primary scheduler log showed owner, null. The timestamp read 5 hours ago. That's when the thread began unraveling. They brought in Colton around 7:10. He was red-faced before he even opened his mouth. Tried to spin it as a minor delay, told everyone to stay focused, to move forward. Then he typed an override command and hit enter. The system spat back, "Admin not recognized." He tried again. Same response. By 7:31, the radar stream went fully dark. I stood up and refilled my mug. The kitchen was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't rush, doesn't flinch. Outside, the wind pushed through the trees, slow and unbothered. It was a strange kind of peace. The kind that only comes when the weight you've been carrying finally lets go. At the base, it was anything but quiet. Phones rang without pause. Teams scrambled to contact regional command to explain why logistics channels were frozen. Vendor uploads failed to validate. Audit jobs didn't trigger. The diagnostics board looked like a Christmas tree blinking error codes no one had seen since the last decade. And through it all, the same question kept surfacing. Who owns the core? They were learning, not fast enough, not with grace, but learning the hard way, that behind every seamless system is a person. And when that person is dismissed, ignored, replaced on a slide deck but not in code, the system doesn't stay loyal to the image. It stays loyal to the hand that built it. I took a sip of coffee and looked down at my printed audit sheet. Highlighted entries, clean columns, every fallback path laid bare. No red ink, no gaps. Just silence where there used to be structure. And a base full of noise trying to pretend that silence didn't mean anything. By mid-morning, the delays had spread across 3 states. Shared logistics between bases in Louisiana and Arizona were showing timestamp mismatches. Interbase radar data couldn't sync because the validation triggers never fired. From inside the Pentagon, the warning boards flashed yellow, then red. Systems marked as secure were now reading offline. Within the hour, a directive was issued: full investigation, immediate deployment. They landed in Texas by noon. 2 black SUVs, 2 men in suits, and a woman with a Department of Defense clearance badge clipped to her collar. No press, no chatter. Just direct access to the server floor and a command-level override. Colton tried to greet them, offer some control back. He was waved aside. These people didn't do courtesy. They logged in, requested the system event chain for the last 72 hours, and began to trace the collapse, line by line. At first, they moved quickly. Credentials, logs, admin overrides, standard protocol. But then, the data started telling a different story. Not one they expected. Not one anyone had prepared for. Every login, every fallback trigger, every successful patch to the core framework had one name on it. SysRH1, same ID, same timestamps. Same fingerprint. Not a team, not a unit. One man. They cross-referenced it with the base personnel directory. It came back labeled Hayes Richard T. Status. Retired. Last active clearance update, 2019. No successor listed. No credential handoff. No system-level access reassignments in 5 years. The lead investigator leaned back in his chair. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he asked one question. Has anyone spoken to this man? In the adjacent room, Colton went pale. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The DOD rep turned the monitor toward the group. On the screen, a web of dependencies sprawled out like nerves in a brain. At the center, one node pulsed. SysRH1. The system hadn't failed. It had followed orders. Orders written years ago by someone who never expected to be forgotten. Someone who had simply stepped back. The room grew heavy. The kind of silence that means something important has just changed. They didn't ask who built it. They already knew. They asked how it had been allowed to go this long. No updates. No audits. No oversight. Just trust, stretched across a decade and stapled to one name. When they left the base, they didn't take questions. They didn't brief the staff. They carried the logs, the audit trails, and a new understanding. Not just about the system, about the man. The one who was never on stage, never in uniform for photo ops, but whose code still carried planes, tracked cargo, filtered radar, and held the safety of thousands. All from the shadows, all from memory. And now, they knew his name. The first call came at 7:42 a.m. I let it ring. They left no voicemail. The second call came 12 minutes later, then a third just after 8. I didn't pick up. I made coffee instead. Same mug, same porch chair. I watched the morning come up like it always did. Calm, slow, uncaring. At 8:17, an email came through. Subject line, urgent assistance request. No greeting, just 3 sentences asking if I could come in to help. I didn't reply. Not yet. I waited. Let the silence work for me this time. At 9:06, a black SUV parked down the street. Windows tinted, engine running. They didn't knock. They didn't have to. They already knew. I powered on my laptop and wrote the contract. No fluff, no pleasantries, 6 lines. Line 1. Full restoration of all withheld pay from the date of my demotion. Line 2. Reinstatement of my final year's performance bonus. Line 3. A one-time consulting fee of $750,000 paid up front, no delays. Line 4. A signed written apology from command level, no delegation, no template copy. Line 5. No future obligations, no callback clause, no on-call requirement. Line 6. Once the restoration is complete, I personally remove all my credentials, and then I am gone for good. I attached it as a PDF. Subject, terms, deadline, noon, no body text. Just the file. From the window, I watched a young officer step out of the SUV and look up at the house. He didn't approach. He just stood there, holding a phone. Then he got back in the car and left. I didn't smile. There was nothing satisfying about it, just clarity. They needed me, and now they would have to say it out loud. Back at the base, the thread began unraveling. The terms were passed around quickly. Legal argued, finance stalled. Command hesitated, but the system was still dead. And every second it stayed that way, more backups failed, more deadlines slipped, more questions reached higher levels. By 10:22, the decision was made. Every term, every line approved. No edits, no negotiation. I received the confirmation email from the same person who once called me a legacy liability. This time, the subject line just read, agreed. I downloaded the PDF with their signature. Then I stood up, shut my laptop, and finally took a deep breath. I had asked for what I was worth. They paid it. Not because they respected me, but because they had no other choice. I walked back into that base with no badge, no escort, and no ceremony. Just the same steps I had taken for 20 years. Through the side corridor, past the hum of vending machines, down the long hallway that always stayed too cold. The place looked the same, but everyone moved quieter now. Nobody looked me in the eye. Inside the server room, it was just me and the machines. No rush, no orders. I moved through the interface like I had 100 times before, brought the fallback scheduler back online, reconnected the radar sync, the flight queues, the logistics modules. One by one, every line of code I had written flickered green again. Jobs resumed, reports flowed, alerts cleared, the heartbeat returned. When the final module stabilized, I opened the admin console, typed in my ID, revoked every credential tied to my name. No backup, no shadow access. Gone. Then I found the old system noteboard, the one nobody used anymore. And I typed one last message. Respect the ones who built the silence you depend on. I stood up, took one last look at the blinking lights, not to admire them, just to say goodbye. Then I walked out the same door I had walked through all those years ago. Nothing dramatic, no applause. Just clean air, a quiet sky, and a lighter step. I didn't feel proud, didn't feel victorious. I felt free, and that was enough.